Hello, I'm Jeff Bell, Executive Director for the Vala Simpson Whirligig Park and Museum. I'm also the Arts Innovation Coordinator for the City of Wilson. Welcome to this year's Gig East Digital Summit. We're happy to put together a panel today to discuss emerging and evolving arts organizations and particularly talk about how those organizations have changed and ramped up what they're doing during the time of COVID. Thank you everybody for joining us today. We have Carly Jones, Program Director for Arts and Arts Organizations from the North Carolina Arts Council. We have Brandon Cordry, Director of VAE in Raleigh. And we have Kathy Hardison, Executive Director of Wilson Arts. So we're happy to have a good group here today. We're talking about emerging and evolving arts organizations. We really came up with this concept about a year ago to look at how organizations are changing over time. And we've got three organizations that the youngest, I believe, is VAE, and they're 40 years old. And so we wanted to talk about how these organizations have changed over time and evolved to meet the current needs of the times. And then I think during COVID, it's brought a lot of those same issues into focus so that we're dealing very rapidly with continuing to evolve and change, and we'll talk about some of those things. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was that evolution over time. And I'd like to talk first to Kathy Hardison, who's the Executive Director of Wilson Arts here in Wilson. And your organization is going through a great change right now. That's been happening really over the last 3 or 4 years, but I'd love for you to explain kind of what y'all are doing to meet the upcoming needs of artists in our community, and also you've just recently gone through a big rebranding project.
Yeah, so Wilson Arts is going through a lot of transition right now. We have been an organization that has served Wilson County for over 50 years, and over that span of time, the Wilson Arts has fulfilled many gaps within the Wilson community. There's a couple of big changes, but one of them is a change of space. The new building is a 20,000 square foot facility, but it's all on one floor. So from an accessibility standpoint, this is huge. This eliminates a lot of barriers for people to participate in the arts, and also is wonderful from a cost-saving standpoint as well, because the former space was very multi-level, very compartmentalized. We're excited about this space because it's going to provide a better flow. Having a space that was a blank canvas that we could design ourselves was really challenging and kind of a big deal, because there's not many arts organizations that get to design their own space. We're constantly making what we have work and kind of working around what's there. And that was interesting and challenging because, we fill the gap. So that might look different 10 years from now, 20 years from now. So flexibility was really important when we were designing the space. We're also undergoing a brand change. We changed from the Arts Council of Wilson, which legally we still will be the Arts Council of Wilson, to Wilson Arts, in hopes that we'll be a little more relatable. Council kind of has a stiff governmental feel to it, and realize our full potential as a vibrant cultural arts center.
It's really cool. It's going to be exciting, I think, for a lot of people here in Wilson, and the sort of things that you'll be able to do that you couldn't have done previously are pretty incredible. With VAE, I don't even know if I could, in my mind, grasp how that organization has changed over the years. I remember when I was in an undergrad, we drove up to Raleigh, and I went to the old VAE location at City Market, and it's been an incredible kind of transition. Is there even a way to kind of talk through that evolution?
Yeah, so VA's, this 2020 is our 40th year. What a year. And I kind of break it down into 3 different times. So VAE and Artsplosure were founded in the same year. VAE was founded as Wake Visual Art Association. What a lovely mouthful in comparison to Wilson Arts. And then became Visual Art Exchange, and now we mostly go by an acronym of VAE. But in the beginning, they were private galleries and they were museums in Raleigh, and so there was no on ramp for artists trying to sort of launch into their careers, right? And so they started VAE as a group of dedicated volunteers and artists in order to create that on ramp. So in the first, decade or so of VAE's existence, the key thing that they brought to the city was just accessible space.
Yeah.
And then transition into filling in another gap in the city is kind of a similar narrative to Kathy's. Like VAE's sort of been flexing and molding to fill in those gaps, and it was to provide artists with the entrepreneurial training they needed to get into gallery spaces, to build that career that would lead to a museum. Throughout that time, we're also still having space, mostly through jury calls and bringing in outside juries, and always trying to remain the sort of neutral part, even in our own organization. And then most recently, over the past 4 to 6 years, we transitioned to being an organization that's focused on socially engaged art and using an open source process to get to the end result, which is positive change for our communities. And so for us, socially engaged art is a more specific type of art, and an open source process is a more specific process, and it does force us to come out of that passive role and be a more active part of our community, and to make ourselves unique so that we can play a partnership with other organizations. Because over those 4 decades, instead of being one of 2 organizations founded in 1980, we've had multiple other spaces join us, and they're all specializing in different things, and VAE just continue to try and be putty and fill in those holes, but that's not a really compelling mission, right? And so we've really put a stake in the ground in order to play our part and play it really well and have that be complementary to our other partners.
Yeah, it's incredible. I think if someone went back in time and saw the organization and then saw it today, you would not even really recognize it. And what you're talking about, that engagement and forward thinkingness is pretty incredible for any organization, and it's pretty neat to see. And so we'll go to Carly, who's involved with the biggest arts organization in our state and really kind of leads the way that all of us work with, the North Carolina Arts Council. It's always, to me, an interesting mission, Carly, to think about all the things that y'all do. The fact that you, on one hand, help kind of continue the messaging and the stories around traditional folk art and making everyone understand how important that is to continue some of those traditional ways of making music and artwork and all of those things, and at the same time also engaging very contemporary ways of making, and also trying to connect with every county in the state. I can't wrap my head around it, but maybe talk about the history of the North Carolina Arts Council and how y'all have continued to try to change and continue to engage more and more in local communities.
Well, our organization is a little bit different because we are a state agency. So we're actually a part of the government. We're a division within the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources. Because of how long our state's Arts Council has been around, our programs have truly matured. We've been able to reach all parts of the state of North Carolina. As you all know, North Carolina is a big, long state with lots of different communities and cultures to serve that are vastly different and work in different ways. And our mission is to serve the arts sector of North Carolina and to provide arts for all people. Arts for all is our mission. So that speaks to what you're talking about, Jeff, with reaching, some of the more traditional art forms. We have a folk life director, Zoe Van Buren. Our executive director, Wayne Martin, is a musician. And so there is a soft place in our heart for those traditional art forms and all sorts of visual arts as well. So yeah, we serve the arts sector in various ways. I lead the artists and organizations team. So we manage a large statewide fellowship program for individual artists of all disciplines. So that's visual artists, theater artists, dancers, musicians, film artists, literature. And I will say our fellowship program is probably one of the most generous in the country. They're $10,000 fellowships for the creation of new work. I do want to say, and I'm sure we'll get into this in just a little bit, that we have had to shift some of our programs and put some things on pause due to the fact that we are in the midst of this pandemic. But we are very proud of our fellowship program and the support that we provide individual artists. And to make sure that North Carolina is a place that artists can live and work. So that's one part of my team's work. And then, of course, we also provide funding and support for organizations. So that goes from small grassroots organizations all the way to our larger, symphonies and museums, visual art museums, et cetera. So we provide program support, project support for organizations, and we also provide operational support as well. And we'll get into this. We've also shifted a bit to providing more operational support during this time as well for folks, because that seems to be what organizations really need right now. We have one of the largest arts council systems in the country as well. We don't have an arts council in all 100 counties, but we're, working towards that. And we have found ways to make sure that those counties that don't have arts councils are also served. So we support our arts councils through funding and through development and support. We make sure that folks have the resources that they need to provide programming and spaces for artists and for communities to enjoy the arts and to be able to benefit from the arts.
Yeah, I think the fellowship program is pretty incredible. I think probably all of us have seen what that has meant for individual artists. I mean, the money it's $10,000. It's huge. It makes a big impact on their lives, but just the recognition of what that means and how it has sort of taken so many artists from one place to a whole nother level in their work is a pretty incredible program. And to roll that out every other year for visual artists and the in-between years for writers is an incredible process, I'm sure, for y'all, but the results are unbelievable, how they've impacted artists. We've talked about our individual organizations, and maybe now we can get into some more specific programming. I think over time, obviously, all of us think about programming in different ways and what we're doing to engage the public and how we are responding to changes over time. And I know specifically here at Wilson Arts, y'all have had to really be adaptive because of not having the full space. So can you talk about how y'all have tried to work within specifically the Boykin Theater to keep those exhibitions and programs rolling without a full-size space?
Well, it's a little challenging because we always want to do more than what we have space for. Actually, this stage has been really great for camps and classes during COVID because there's plenty of space. We can distance out. So we've been doing performances and classes on the stage here. And we also have been utilizing, we call it the Hammond Gallery, also known as the lobby. And that has been a pretty good gallery space. We're a little limited in the size of three-dimensional work in there, but the walls are gorgeous because they have they're brick and they have the old posters from back in the day when this was a vaudeville theater, and they would poster the walls. And it's just been a neat space because we're kind of all spread out all over town pretty much. We have our own Act for Youth program, which is youth theater, and there's two other organizations that we provide an art of support for: Visions Community Theater and Playhouse. So sometimes we have rehearsals for 3 different shows at 3 different places because we rent out this space as well and have other activities. So I'm really looking forward to having that more in a central location, creating this hub of artistic energy where there's just more kind of going on in one space. But I'm really proud of us because I feel like we've identified a lot of wonderful resources and people have been really generous in terms of letting us use their space in the interim.
Yeah, that's neat. Carly, I was thinking before we talked about the program that y'all do called Music in the Mansion. I guess in some ways it focuses on traditional arts, but also folks working in music today and kind of taking those traditional music to another kind of level. Can you talk about how that was created and what that program is?
Sure, yeah. Music at the Mansion was a special project. Our inaugural year of Music at the Mansion was last year, and it was one of the programs that came from the Come Here, North Carolina campaign. It's a play on words, Come Here, HEAR, North Carolina, to celebrate North Carolina's musicians and the rich history of music here in North Carolina. And when I first got to the Arts Council, I actually started as the music director. So Come Here, North Carolina, I was very involved in and very proud of being a North Carolinian and a musician myself. A lot of folks don't even know that North Carolina has such a rich legacy when it comes to what we have given American music. So and it goes from not just traditional music genres, but all the way to hip hop. To celebrate that rich legacy and also to make folks aware of that rich legacy, Come Here, North Carolina was birthed. And Music at the Mansion was our First Lady, Kristen Cooper's way of supporting Come Here, North Carolina. She wanted to bring in musicians from North Carolina. I kind of describe it as MTV Unplugged, but at the governor's mansion, because it's in, we had it in the big gold ballroom. So definitely fancy, but I had the pleasure of leading the curation of that series. And one of our goals was to display the diversity of cultures and communities from throughout the state through music. It was really important to us to not only give this space to these musicians, but to encourage them to tell their story of their culture and their communities and their families and friends through music. It was a very kind of relaxed vibe where they were able to talk about the songs that they chose for that space. And we wanted to make sure that the small audience, that we asked the musicians first who they would like to invite. This was not a concert series for politicians, right? This was a concert series to bring in the people of North Carolina to the executive mansion, which our governor and first lady called the People's House, and to really truly celebrate what it means to them to be a North Carolinian through music. And it was a beautiful series. We also, of course, had it professionally filmed, and we released it to the public as a series so that everyone throughout the state of North Carolina could enjoy that and to really tell their stories on a mass scale through the arts, through music, which is one of the most powerful tools of storytelling, in my personal opinion. So yeah, it was a beautiful series. I hope you all are able to check it out. It's still on our website.
It is. It's really neat. And when you're talking about diversity, I think VAE has been so. I guess every organization could do more and be more focused on diversity, of course. But VAE has been, I think, very intentional about the way they've approached and tried to engage and be open and forward-thinking about diversity and programming and education. Can you talk about how you were sort of it was very much a conscious decision to keep pushing those boundaries?
One of the things we always talk about is like art's ability to lower people's guard and then engage them in a conversation that they'd avoid at the Thanksgiving table, right? Or just like with a larger family gathering, right? You don't want to hear your uncle's viewpoints on this. But if you're like at an exhibition, all of a sudden you sort of are talking about the art and then it sort of, you go up and then all of a sudden you're talking about things that are more challenging. And we always say that like that is really a tool for building trust. we can intentionally invest in communities. And the way that we've always done that is not through white saviorism, but through trying to build trust, right? There are communities out there, the disability community, the queer community, communities of color, who've lost faith in the arts because the institutional arts continue to perpetuate racism and they continue to put them at the margins. And so I think the most intentional part for us came in working with people with disabilities, because that was my background that I brought to VAE with me. And then after the murder of Eric Garner, I think several of us were sitting around our office and we were like, there's a national conversation happening here that the arts should be a part of, and the arts in Raleigh should be a part of. We as an organization do not have the staff or the board to have this conversation genuinely. So what does that look like? And for us, that meant going to Mike Williams and Linda Dallas and taking them to lunch and just saying, if we gave you the space and like our staff and our $5 that we have in our bank account, what could you do? What would you want to do? Does this sound interesting to you? And luckily it did. Neither Mike nor Linda have traditional curatorial backgrounds. They were just people who'd invested in VAE and their time and their energy and their compassion, and we were trying to do the same back. And they brought together a group of community members into our space. And we just continued to build on that. That first project was called Black on Black. And Mike and I were just in the gallery late, and he was talking about what to call it, and we were throwing around names, and we were like, what if it was just called Black? And then we were like, what if it's called Black on Black? And I'll never forget like how small of a conversation that was. And then we like decided that would be the name, and like that was the whole purpose of the conversation. And then Mike has run with that from the mountains to the sea of North Carolina, produced exhibitions showcasing hundreds of artists of color through his own project called the Black on Black Project now. That built a lot of trust, and it opened up conversations, and it made things happen that otherwise wouldn't, and not all of it was tied to the art, but it sort of spiraled out of that.
Right.
And we took that as a model, and we've just perpetuated it with, again, the disability community, with female artists, with queer artists, and just continuing to partner with other people in our community and say, okay, what's the work that you're doing?
Yeah.
And how are you going about doing it? And then advocating that the arts could be a part of getting to that same goal, right? So that includes, shows about healthcare. The 2 additional exhibitions we did with Mike, Black on Black V2 and V3, had very specific ties to the community and what communities of color in Raleigh-Durham wanted, and then how art could play a role in sort of moving that conversation forward. I don't think that art has the ability to solve every problem in the world, but I definitely think that more people should think of it as a tool in their toolbox. And I think the other thing is like we just don't have a lot, right? Like we're very scrappy.
Yeah.
We've had multiple opportunities to expand or become bigger, or we had one very recently, that would have really expanded VAE and given us more money in the bank and more assets and all the things that we're supposed to aspire to. And we ultimately just felt like it wouldn't further our ability to actually build trust, and that's key to doing the work we want to do. And so we just keep turning those down, and we keep having our roughly $400,000 to $500,000 budget and fumbling through the dark, and we like kind of get it right.
Yeah.
So we'll continue to mess up, we'll continue to try, but I think for us it was just no one in Raleigh was being intentional about trying to rebuild that lost trust, and we were at that time looking for a niche to focus on. It's working for us right now.
Well, I think the Black on Black project was just incredible in what it's done. And I've been around the art in the Triangle for a long time. And, I knew really good African-American artists in a lot of different sectors. But the way that has coalesced, and you can now really envision and understand the breadth of what is being created in our state is incredible. And that makes it easy for people like me who may not know where to go and look for things, to really shine a light on them and to see what some of those artists have really done since then because they've gotten that exposure.
Yeah,
I
should
did
shout
wanna-
out Linda as well,
Yeah.
because that was a co-equal partnership, and at the same time that Mike has spun Black on Black off into Black on Black Project, which is fiscally sponsored by VAE, she spun off Envision St. Agnes, which is taking literally the shell of a building that was extremely important to Black communities. It was the only healthcare institution, and it's right there in our backyard. It's right down the street from where Carly's joining us right now.
Right.
And she's, again, pulled artists in and pulled interactive experiences in and is telling that story through art and really bringing life back to the shell of a building. So Linda Dallas and Envision.
It's
St. Agnes.
really neat stuff what they've done. And Carly, you were an artist in one of the Black on Black, I think Volume 3.
Yes, I was. I was around for that very first Black on Black, just helping with programming around some of the exhibition. And I was so inspired by seeing that, being a Black artist myself, and just being surrounded by so many incredible Black creative people, and that being displayed in the middle of downtown Raleigh was a feeling that I can't really describe. You know, it was just empowering, I guess would be the word. That it was quite a buzz. I'm very, very proud of Linda Dallas. She's a real mentor of mine. I think she does incredible things for our community. My family, and particularly my granddad, was a professor at St. Augustine's College, now University, which is the HBCU, the Historically Black College that is connected to St. Agnes. And so having our histories told, it's really important for the cultural landscape to be inclusive, you know, when we're telling these stories through the arts. And so seeing the work that Linda and Mike Williams put together, it was really, really inspiring. And I'm so glad that VAE and that, you know, has really stepped up to the plate to be able to provide that space, because that is what it's going to take for the cultural landscape to change. Are the people that have the power, they have to make space. And that's the only way that everyone's stories are going to be able to be told. It's not that there aren't innovators and creative thinkers and incredible artists that are Black and brown. It's that they have not traditionally had the space to do that work. And so, I'm really proud of what VAE has done, what Black on Black has done, and I hope to see more of it.
She's also being modest. Her voice came out of 2 giant speakers and filled an entire Kmart.
Yeah.
Yeah. The store that was next to Kmart like complained a couple of times because we turned it up too loud. Yeah, it was on a giant billboard and then blasted through an abandoned Kmart we took over for the exhibition.
It was an incredible exhibition, and that work of art was just beautiful. I mean, it was really moving and impressive. So I appreciate being able to see that. So again, our topic today is about evolving and changing arts organizations, and I think obviously that has been ramped up even more during the time of COVID. And so I'd love to talk to each of y'all about what y'all have done and how y'all have continued to engage. I know VAE did or has been involved with an artist fund, which is, I don't even know how that has raised so much money, but it's really supported a lot of artists during this time when they haven't been able to sell their work or get out in public or go to markets and all of those things. How did that fund even start to happen?
So VAE had been kind of preoccupied. We hosted our largest annual fundraiser, our gala at Dorton Arena, right before, and we decided to close our space to keep everyone safe, which we felt like because we're at the state's capital, right, all the organizations are located there, there were going to be resources available for certain counties, right? But there probably were going to be some of the 100 counties of North Carolina where no local fund was set up. So you got some great things in like Pitt County and Mecklenburg and Durham, Orange County, et cetera. Like some of these places really banded together. A lot of them run arts councils, like Kathy, and one's headed or funded in part by Carly's organization. And we decided, like, what if we could fill in the gaps and make it statewide? And I made a graphic that said that, and we put it on a website, and we said, apply if you need funds. And then, like, my staff went on a staff retreat. We went to the beach for a couple of days to do long-range planning at the beginning of COVID. It was a great time. It's so much forethought. And we got like 100 applications in the first like 3 days. And we're like, oh no. But we also got a lot of money, and we basically just said, you know, artists are people, and people are in trouble, but the people that we're in contact with are artists, and that's who we can help. So if you want to help artists, donate money. And people did. And to date, we're over $200,000 in, I don't remember the total. And we're kind of at this point, we're at a pendulum trying to swing back and forth of like, do we accept more applications? Oh no, we got to raise more money. We raised too much money. Let's accept more applications. We just closed a wait list and allowed those artists, if they wanted to or still needed to apply, and 97 of them did. And we have like just shy of $10,000 left in the fund. So that'll get us to about a third of them. We've been providing about $300 of stimulus to artists, which isn't a ton, but at the time, remember, it's going to be like 3 months, and you could buy some groceries with this, right? We're really hoping that a grassroots effort will also happen in conjunction with some of the things Carly can talk about to like begin re-employing artists, right? Safely and just adjusting to a new landscape. And VAE started to, pay artists for their work again, as well as through the relief fund.
That's incredible that total that y'all have put together and gotten out to people. And as Brandon said, Carly, you have, as an organization, the North Carolina Arts Council has really very quickly kind of made changes in funding and what you're funding and who, to make sure that artists there's more of a focus towards getting artists the help they need at this time. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So there's a number of things that we've had to do. Us at the North Carolina Arts Council, as I said earlier, we are a state agency for the government. And so we have usually a very prescribed way that we do things that we've done over the years. And we have had to adjust. We've had to listen to the needs of the field. I mean, this is just such an unprecedented time and what's happening. And so I think the very first thing that we did were all of the program support grants that we had already distributed, all of these programs that were being canceled because places were closed. There was not programming happening. And so we quickly shifted to change those contracts to be operation support, rent, salary of staff, marketing efforts, whatever it is that they need, the bills that it takes to keep an organization functioning. So they were able to use those funds for whatever it is that they needed to use it for to kind of quote unquote stay alive. So that's the first thing that we did. And then of course, hearing the needs of individual artists loud and clear, the arts industry, that, people talk about restaurants and small businesses. I mean, these arts organizations, they are small businesses. They are businesses. And that's what people have to remember outside of the arts field. And then the folks that are working within those organizations or for those organizations, the individual artists, needing grocery money, as Brandon said, or just, being able to survive. We also have, for individual artists, the artist support grants that we have started. It's a new program that we are doing in conjunction with our arts councils throughout the state. And our arts councils are grouped together in specific regions so that they can reach those places that don't have established arts councils. And so these funds, individual artists can apply through their region, through the lead arts council in their region, and they can receive funds it does not have to go towards a project. It can go towards artist fees, professional development, equipment, whatever it is that they need. That is what those funds are for, to support artists through this time as well. But we have a whole COVID resource guide on our website with everything that I'm talking about right now that folks can go to, individual artists and organizations.
I know here in Wilson, Kathy and I and Historic Downtown Wilson partnered to create a platform for local musicians. Can you talk a little bit about that, Kathy?
Yeah. I mean, as soon as the pandemic hit, musicians had no income. I mean, they rely on performing at concerts, at restaurants, and anywhere they can perform. So suddenly, their income streams were severed and they didn't have a way to make money. They didn't have an outlet to do what they loved. So the organizations here in Wilson County that typically produce concerts and events kind of banded together and were like, well, what can we do? We certainly were supportive of VA's effort to provide artist support grants, so we promoted that because they were serving the whole state. But locally, we created this group called the Wilson Limelight, which was a Facebook group where musicians and dancers, performers could post content. And we were seeing a lot of that happening anyway, as we just went through the shock of having to shut down and not socialize and be home and be safe. A lot of artists were doing what they could to kind of help ease that transition. So this way they could share their work, hopefully reach an audience that perhaps they've never reached before. They could kind of create this online tip jar, so hopefully they could capture a little bit of income that way. But I know that I've been exposed to a lot of new artists and new talent that way, so I've really enjoyed that aspect of it.
It's been really neat to see, and I still see people, requesting to be members every day. So
Yeah.
it's continuing to grow. It's been really cool. One thing I'd like to maybe talk about as we're wrapping up is, I was thinking all of us are artists, and so that's always interesting to me. When I first probably went to undergrad, the only outlet I thought about was you can either be an artist and make enough money to exist, which is next to impossible, or you can be a college professor. That seemed like the route that most of the time they directed you into. But I was always more drawn to working in arts organizations, museums, and things like that. And I think over time you see more and more of that being a direction artists take as their sort of other career. And so that was interesting to me that all of us are artists in our own way. And so I wanted to talk about maybe how that informs your work. How does being an artist sort of help you go about what you do, and how do you direct your energies?
I definitely think that being an artist myself, knowing what it's like to hone my craft, spend hours and hours in the practice room for 4 years, and knowing what it's like to work and be paid and work on a contract. And it takes really experiencing that to understand the needs of artists. And also knowing artists on an individual artist level as colleagues. It helps for me to be able to talk to other artists on that level, to know what their needs are, so that we can provide professional development, we can provide funding and fellowship opportunities, so that we can really have a good pulse on what's going on in the arts community as a whole. So I definitely think that my experience as an artist influences my work. And and I'm not the only one. We have quite a few artists at the North Carolina Arts Council that are arts administrators with the Arts Council. So I think it definitely helps us be able to have a perspective so that we are offering intentional resources.
I'm lucky enough to wake up and see a Brandon Cordry work of art in my room every day. So I know that you're an exceptional artist as well. So how does that kind of make you go about your daily work?
Yeah, I have a degree in painting, and they taught me nothing about any of my daily job.
Actually, me and Brandon shared a studio.
Yeah,
That's
we
right.
did. Kathy had a lot of creepy dolls, and I cut up a lot of magazines. My whole reason of getting into arts administration was I did it before I graduated. It was just I need to make money, and literally in this moment, not a long time plan, but I need to eat. And we all understand that you can hire an artist to do almost anything, right?
Yeah.
our director of operations has a degree in sculpture and art history. I've learned how to build budgets. Our budget is larger than it ever has been. I learned how to write grants, all that stuff, HR, etc. But the thing that you can't bring to it is like an appreciation for the skills that artists actually bring to every role that they're ever thrown in. And it's because we have creative brains and we've built things with our hands. We understand how something can actually be larger than the sum of its parts. And so I'm really hoping that we're going to build something new and exciting, and I think that creative thinkers will play a big role in that. And I think all of us being artists recognize that artists are those people, right? Like we are entrepreneurs. We are the people that can envision something new, and we don't get caught in the weeds of like policy or politics or, oh gosh, who will write the pamphlet? Like who needs a pamphlet? Let's just throw paint and go.
Yeah.
Like we have the ability to succeed in this time because so many rules have been thrown. I mean, Carly's job is dictated by the legislature of North Carolina. And Carly shows up to work every day creative, and that's what led the North Carolina Arts Council to being able to turn a giant ship to be actually a problem solver during this time. And so we approach things with a much more creative attitude, and I think that always serves us, but that really serves us well right now.
Yeah. So Kathy, talk about how your own artwork has kind of informed your arts administrative work.
Being an arts administrator is very fulfilling work. I don't have a whole lot of extra time these days to be doing my own work. I kind of got into arts administration before I graduated college, much like Brandon, and I just fell in love with it there. I started out at Emerge Gallery and Art Center in Greenville as an intern, and I found my work there to be very purposeful, very fulfilling. I felt like I was making a difference in people's lives and helping artists and helping children be successful through the arts, and I love it, and it's kind of addictive. One silver lining of COVID is I am able to practice my craft of painting. I'm a painter, and that's been nice. It's kind of, I've been selling these dog portraits. They've been helping me knock down some student loans. So that's been fun, but it's been hard being a local arts agency during the pandemic because we're seeing so many income streams severed, and we're definitely in survival mode, just like Carly was saying, and that they're sending support for operations to local arts agencies. And we're definitely feeling that, but at the same time, there's almost this like freeing effect where we don't have to do everything the same way that we've always done. I mean, you can't do things the same way you've always done. And there's part of that that's actually a little bit invigorating and exciting because it's just a blank slate. And we're doing things now that I feel like it would have taken us probably years to get to in terms of leveraging technology and trying out new things.
I will say one other thing about that question that you asked, Jeff, about being an arts administrator and being an artist. Particularly at this time, it is not lost on me that if I were doing what 16-year-old Carly wanted to be doing right now, which is singing on Broadway, I would be unemployed right now. And the fact that we are serving artists that are colleagues of mine, I'm able to have kind of what I call a dual career right now, right? So I have my arts administration work, and then I also have my performance work, my artistic work, and I'm able to lean on that. And that I'm very grateful for right now.
Yeah.
But I also think that, not that I wouldn't be working just as hard if I wasn't an artist, but the fact that those are my colleagues that I've been on stage with, that those are folks that I know personally from the arts world because I've been within that community, makes me work even harder because I know that I could just as easily be in those shoes.
I think maybe this is a good point to wrap up. I love the fact that we've kind of ended on the creative note and the way Brandon described artists as being these creative people that can problem solve so well. And I think that ties in with the sort of idea of the panel, but also of Gig East in general, this sort of innovative, entrepreneurial, sort of creative way of thinking. And so I think that's a good way to wrap up, and I appreciate all of you being a part of it today. So Kathy, Brandon, and Carly, thank you so much.
Thank you.